Instructor, Human Factors International. Welcome, ma'am. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Before I hand over the session to I'm going to request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the panel will address a selected few at the end of the session. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nishta. Appreciate it. I would also like to thank the organizers, Internet and Mobile Association for India, for organizing this amazing Design Leadership Summit 2020. Missed this incredibly tough times that we are all in. Welcome all of you. Welcome to participants. This is an interesting topic, very close to my heart. Does design education need reinventing in this new normal? So to help answer this question, we of course, as introduced by Nishta, have these wonderful four people with us to really dissect and see what we can come up with as to what we can do. Do we need a reinvention of the design education in this new normal? Is this a new normal? And so on and so forth. So I'll take this few minutes to reintroduce our speakers. Praveen Nahar is the director of National Institute of Design, India, um, which is located in Ahmedabad, with its extension campuses in Gandhinagar and Bangalore. He has also been a faculty member in the product design discipline at NIT since 2002. Praveen studied product engineering at the undergraduate level. He did his master's in industrial design from Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, in addition to pursuing a postgraduate course in sustainable design from Delft University of Technology, Netherlands. He has over 23 years of experience in design teaching, consultancy, and research. Prior to joining NIT, he was a lecturer in industrial design at IIT Bombay for 4 years and also worked as a research associate in transportation research at IIT Delhi for 2 years. Masaaki Kurosu is a professor emeritus at the Open University of Japan. He's also president emeritus of Human Centered Design Network, HCD Net, in Japan. Based on his career as a usability and UX professional in industry and academia, he proposed the concept of user engineering called artifact evolution theory, AET, and now a new concept of life activity design, LAD. Before coming to National Institute of Multimedia Education, NIME, that was consolidated to the Open University of Japan in 2009, he was a professor at the Faculty of Informatics at Shizuoka University. He was formerly working for Hitachi Limited at the Design Center and the Central Research Institute. He graduated the PhD course of psychology at Waseda University. He served as a conference chair for many conferences. He is the author and or the contributor of more than 60 books, including Theory of UX, 2020, that is just coming up. Tapan Parikh is an associate professor at Cornell Tech and Information Science Department of Cornell University. His research includes HCI and the design and evolution of informatics technology, of education, governance, and international development. Tapan's students have started several tech companies based on his research and teaching. He holds a SPB degree in molecular modeling with honors from Brown University and MS and PhD degrees in computer science from the University of Washington, where his dissertation won the William Chan Memorial Award. Tapan has received the NSF Career Award and a Sloan Fellowship and was named the TR35 Humanitarian of the Year. Dr. Deepa Reddy is a cultural and anthropologist and tenured faculty at the University of Houston, Cleveland, USA since 2000, and adjunct since 2010. She has conducted ethnographic research on the Indian women's movement, activism, and nationalism, and environmental issues in India. Dr. Reddy has worked with HFI since 2011 as a consulting researcher and trainer. Her role centers on the understanding user needs via ethnographic and user-centered research methods and identifying cultural insights relevant to UX strategy and design, particularly for emerging markets. She continues to work on several international projects that focus on cross-cultural expert review, as well as full-fledged ethnographic ecosystem research. Thank you all for joining us today. I understand that due to differences in time zones, you may be either nearing the bed or rising out of the bed. So I appreciate your dedication and efforts. So let's get to it. Um, what I plan to do is define a little premise for us to begin the dialogue. It's a very interesting topic as to are we reinventing now, before, after? What I mean by after is COVID. But let's look at a long range of time. So last year marked the 100th anniversary of the founding of Bauhaus. Bauhaus, as we all know, was a movement, with its school contributing to an era of thoughtful leaderships, and that shaped the modern world as we live it. Founding principles of Bauhaus lauded function, the idea that design should scale and serve the society. That impact is still felt today in the way we teach practice of design. Bauhaus led to the creation of disciplines like industrial design and product design, focusing on people's needs as a way to inspire them or inspire the form as we speak. Methodologies like human centered design and design thinking respond to the teachings of Bauhaus and align to a certain modernist approach to mass produced objects and now services too. On the eve of this celebration, 2020 brought an unfathomable upheaval in all walks of our lives, including design education. So, my first question is to Praveen. What is new normal now and beyond in design education? And what are your views on how academic institutions are reinventing design curriculum, if at all? And what are the new means to deliver this reinvented curriculum? Praveen,
Yes.
floor is all yours.
So, are you able to see my screen?
Sure.
Sorry, this is. Yeah. So, thanks again, IAMAI for invitation, and thanks Mookesh for the introduction and setting up the context for the session. My deliberation to this panel, as Mookesh posed the question, is about how the context of the world is changing in the new so-called new normal over the time, and as designers or design educators, we are trying to adopt to the transition practices. I would call it a transition practices in this changing times, and a lot of this, of course, from our institutional experience and my individual experience as an academician. So, as I was trying to search what is this new normal is about, it is a state to which the economy, society settles down after a crisis. This is how it defines, on a Wikipedia. When this differs from the situation that prevailed prior to the start of the crisis. This term was, I think, used extensively during the financial crisis of 2017, 2007-8, and aftermath of 2008-12, and now for the COVID-19 pandemic. This is being used extensively now. So when this happened, there was a sudden, we posed a lot of challenges, and we suddenly, felt the disruption of education system, and everything was bound to be shifted to a virtual setting. Uh, also, the challenge, the greatest challenge was the commitment we have made to the design academic and the experiential nature of design education with the heavy dependency on physical resources and interactive nature, experiential nature of education. Also, how do we quickly reorient, readopt, by in terms of our teaching, learning of all the stakeholders, whether it is faculty, teachers, all the service providers, staff, everything. So we kind of posed, many key questions. How do we develop a mindset for transition to remote learning? How we can build learning experience that include emotional, social, community aspects of learning, because everything is happening everywhere, and how we sort of still have the sense of community and sense of emotional bonding. Can we shift towards making people online learning more collaborative, interactive, and engaging? That is one of the key question. And also, how can we design empowering learning spaces? So there were many opportunities, and we responded to many of those opportunities. In this kind of a setting, and I'm sure many design schools or institutions around the world probably may be using it. So we looked at as an opportunity from the point of view of remote or situational learning. So we said that your situation of learning has changed, and you are into, you could directly respond to where you are and what the issues and concerns we are facing in the world today. So a lot of that we set up with people, and we kind of reoriented a lot of ideas and projects to the new context and the situations. And there are many new tools for collaboration and work. We also tried, as I said, blended ideas and all that. We brought in variety of experts from various locations and domains, which was no more restriction for us to, because of the flexibility of this medium. We made curriculum more flexible. Wherever possible, we did a remote facilitation. People could access local workshops, materials. We could send few things from here. So there were a lot of physical movements of goods. Also, we tried to do to make the tactile aspect of education alive. Of course, skill sharing and shared learning goals were very handy, because people could bond with each other and had an emotional connect, and people could actually share each other's skill and resources while they are remote. Of course, there were a lot of virtual design studios where we could demonstrate and bring in virtual experiences. Recently, we also did a conference. All kinds of areas for design exploration and interventions came up. Very interesting idea of translocated, localized, and collaborative making has been explored, where people could send their files to get something done here, or they could set up their own micro maker space to build certain physical sense, and many of those things happen. But that is the kind of response to the immediate situation, and how we had to readopt in a certain time. But if you look at the way the context of the world and the context of design and design education is going to change, and there may be a lot of challenges which are going to emerge, and that challenges will range from healthcare crisis, slowing down the ecological crisis, to redefining economy, relooking at public services, to negotiate the boundaries of local, global, manage ethical impact of technology, society. So there are all kinds of issues. Of course, you look at SDGs, 17 Sustainable Design Development Goals, that also being looked at as a future of design opportunities and the future context of design. And many of these challenges are actually a real challenges as we move towards design education and practice. If you look at the fundamental premise of design, as Mookesh also mentioned, that so the design basically has a lot of sensibilities, at one end, which is very, very universal to all creatives in the world, which is to be able to empathize, observe, analyze, reason, create, be creative, make things, communicate. Those sensibilities coupled with drawing knowledge from all kinds of fields, whether it is art, management, economics, social sciences, and applying to sectors of opportunities. And there are a lot of sensibilities being, are which cut across the disciplines. If you come from a discipline and if you still believe in those disciplines, and the disciplines bring in certain kind of skill sets, but those boundaries are blurring, and probably it is going to diffuse over a time, and that is how I think a lot of shift in education and design will happen. So we were also looking at, there are a lot of anticipated shifts which have happened and which are happening in design and design education and practice. Whether it is shift from expert and disciplinary mindset to moving towards more diffuse and transdisciplinary mindset, more challenge oriented ones. Seeking more we were seeking more simplicity. Now we are embracing complexity. Your audience were users, customers, but now they are co-creators, fellow citizens. uh, you know you are moving towards more iterative and beta friendly iterations, and processes are solutions and processes are more emergent and more knowledge source. So we need to be part of many of these transitions as we are moving on. uh, to summarize, I would say that practice in the changing world order, some of the new frameworks and abilities, attitudes, and behaviors would evolve, and designers will have to develop the approach to their practice, where they have to have a deep respect and advocacy for others. Now, in terms of their skill sets and attitudes and responses, you need to look at probably more cooperation over competition, more radical collaborations and network and alliance building, understanding of worldviews, and develop a lot of comfort with ambiguity, uncertainty, chaos, and contradictions. We'll have to embrace transdisciplinary of the highest order, and be able to deal with micro to macro and vice versa, and to be able to constantly frame and reframe terms in the spatio temporal context. So how this is going to redefine the curriculum approaches. So the curriculums will have to be and will bound to be, or which is also going to be more customizable, more possibility of to be agile, continuously responsive, and anticipatory for change, and also being open for individual contributions, open to individual contributions, and to be able to manage the scope and the scales of variety of situations and problem domains. So this is what I have to say for now in response to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Praveen. You outlined just an amazing challenge for all designers as well as design educators. Um, it's going to be an adaptive world. I think we need to keep, as designers, I don't think I was taught that ability when I was at NID as a student to learn how to adapt from one day to the other, because the days in our days didn't change every day, every month even. It changed maybe after 5 years, but now everything changes after 5 seconds as we speak. So the scale has become
Yes.
dramatic because of various reasons. So thank you for outlining all these challenges for us as we move forward. Being agile and being adaptive is one of them. So thank you, Praveen. Um, I believe that design has the capability to lead because it cuts across all disciplines. As you just pointed out, how we have grown from disciplines to multi and transdisciplines.
Yeah.
Design is transformative because of four major characteristics, I think. Design thinking is, of course, now very prominent in all fields of life, which ensures that the correct problem is being solved. Now, I'm not sure exactly what that correct problem is, because it's correct is again very fuzzy in my mind. Systems thinking, cutting across and encompassing all disciplines. Integrative design, blending of practice and theory. Human-centered design, assuring that people and technology work harmoniously as collaborative players with all stakeholders, as you had pointed out. Design is intended for to be used by people. And in previous, keynote speakers, uh, a lot of people pointed out that it is all about those people and people behavior of the people. Yet I feel that the social and behavioral sciences play little or no role in design curriculum. I may be wrong, but that's what I feel. The next question from that perspective I have is for Masaaki. Masaaki, what are your reviews on this issue and how do we address and reinvent these characteristics going forward during unprecedented time?
Okay. Can you see my slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. I will talk about designers should learn social sciences, including cognitive psychology and perceptual psychology, and all psychologies and so on. Well, first of all, well, you gave us an introduction that Bauhaus was a basis for the human-centered design. But well, I don't think so. Well, Bauhaus emphasized functionalism, and so it means the function-centered design, which focuses on novel function, many functions, better performance, and so on. And it is contrary to the human-centered design, which emphasizes usability, pleasure, and satisfaction. So a function-centered design lacks the knowledge of social sciences or human beings, understanding of the nature of human being. Well, I will focus on the social science, especially on psychology. As you all know, D.A. Norman published 3 books, including the design of everyday things, 1988. And he put emphasis on applying the cognitive psychology, and he called it the cognitive engineering. And he put emphasis on the keywords, such keywords as affordance, mental model, memory, feedback, mapping, human error, and so on. But is cognitive psychology enough? Is my question. The answer is no. Perceptual psychology is also important. For example, designers should consider about the color blindness. And well, as you can see in the lower left figure, two brown or red lines are confusing for color-blinded people like me. I am a color-blinded person, and so this index doesn't give a clear clue to the color-blinded person. And the perceptual integration is also important. Well, this is a map of the wind direction in some part of Japan. But viewers of this map cannot integrate the information. Because uh, arrows arrow has directed to different directions. And third example is a principle of grouping proposed by Gestalt psychologists. As you can see in the calculator, it is a good example. Well, the same functions have same colors and similar shapes and so on. So such important principles should be learned by designers. But other fields of psychology were important, including psychophysics, sensation and perception, as I told you, emotion, personality, and social psychology, and so on. But also other social sciences such as sociology, culture, social anthropology, behavioral economics, politics, and so on are important. Designers, I think, need to know more. In addition to the basic understanding of the human nature and society, basic skills of using computer-based design tools is important, and understanding of algorithm and skill of programming are also important. Sometimes fundamental mathematics, electronics, optics, and ecological viewpoint, global issues, understanding of global issues like SDGs are important. But I focus on the cognitive psychology and perceptual psychology. I will show you here an example of famous Japanese design office Nendo. Some of you may have heard about Nendo company, but applicants for Nendo are required only such skills as you see: product design, required software skills, Illustrator, Photoshop, Rhinoceros, V-Ray, and so on. So no requirements for social science and usability are listed. It is quite regretful. And the output of this company, Nendo, is like this. These are pre-cooked foods, the box of pre-cooked foods. But you can see only circled area, two Chinese characters are different, and other parts doesn't give us any clues on what is the content of the package. So it is not a good design, although some ethical viewpoints are well accepted. So I think designers should learn cognitive psychology and perceptual psychology and psychology in general and more of the social sciences. Well, one is, as you may guess, university and graduate school education. The first of all, qualified teachers, psychologists who understand the design. So such qualified teachers are not many, but they must be adopted. Secondary, application-oriented learning should be provided. So teachers or professors should not only give the psychology per se, but how the disciplines of psychology could be applied to design should be taught at the lectures. And furthermore, what is more important is a recurrent education. Many designers at work at such design offices as Nendo lack the knowledge of social sciences and others. They should learn them serious. And online learning that is now prevalent due to COVID-19 should be provided. And this is my last slide. As a conclusion, not only the higher education at the university and graduate school system should change, but also the current designers and design offices should change. And in order to that purpose, recurrent education is as much important as the higher education. As you can see in the diagram below, uh, some university may give the social science education as marked with a yellow background, but not all. Some universities and graduate school doesn't have such qualified teachers. So design offices at the top adopt such design students as staffs, and some goes to a freelance designer. And so higher education is important, but may not cover all the universities. So I emphasize the importance of the recurrent education to give chances for designers to learn about the psychology and social sciences. That is my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Masaaki. That was really, really enlightening. And I apologize for the Bauhaus. I agree with you. Bauhaus was more about function and less about other things that you talked about. But I believe that all that timed out because of questioning the norms of Bauhaus teaching. But what interested me the most was your conclusion, which is the re-education that needs to, which what you call the recurrent education that may happen in the design offices or even for the academicians themselves. We do forget that we have a lot to learn, as Praveen charted out in his slide how complex design has become in current times. So I appreciate your presentation, and we learned a lot from your things, especially from the perspective of social sciences and psychology, how important and how it should be integrated in design curriculum. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your understanding.
Thank you, sir. Interestingly enough, most theory in design today comes from other disciplines, just as Masaaki pointed out, from social sciences and others. Principles of product design come from mechanical engineering, for example. The theoretical foundations of what we are today call the interaction design, user experience, user-computer interaction it comes primarily from the social and behavioral sciences, as Masaaki pointed out, psychology, cognitive science, anthropology, and sociology and computer science, more importantly. We need to theorize and approach, and make approaches that combine the analytics with the synthetic, the knowledge of science, engineering, and social sciences with the practice of design. I see Tapan has just joined us. So, Tapan, this is your field. The next question is directly for you. It's there are two parts question. So permit me to break it up for you. First question is, what are your views on programming and mechatronics being an integral part of design education? Number one. Number two, how should the universities reinvent design education?
Thanks so much, Mookesh. Thanks so much for the introduction and for all the other panelists who've joined. So I don't have slides, but I'm going to post some notes into the chat, and everyone's free to follow along as they like. But I'll be covering all the material, so you need not visit the link. So I'm going to come around to your question kind of in a roundabout way by giving you some of my own trajectory and history and how I kind of see the answer to that question. It may not be clear along the way how I'm going to get back to the question, but trust me, I'll eventually get back there because I am in fact a professor. But I want to kind of build on what Masaaki was saying a little bit, and also what you were saying. I think in the importance of theory, and I think that's really important. And so I really want to start with the importance of theory, and especially the importance of social theory. And when I took this prompt, the new normal, I was thinking less about the specific conditions of the pandemic and more thinking about a world where those kinds of crises are recurrent, where we're having recurring ecological, economic, social crises, and what can designers do within that kind of rapidly changing environment. So for me, I think, I've been able to draw a lot of inspiration from social theory, and especially critical social theory, when I try to think about that question. And so I want to start with a quote from one of my favorite theorists. And so here's the quote: "All that is solid melts into air. All that is sacred is profane. and man is at last faced with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. So, I think that's a really nice distillation of the kind of things we're talking about in terms of this incredibly rapid pace of change that we're facing in the world right now. And if I'm going to give away the punchline, that quote is from the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And so, I really want to think about what can this kind of critical tradition that was started by Marx really bring to design discourse, and especially in terms of HCI and user experience, which is where I work. And so I think a lot of times when we think about critique within HCI and user experience, we think at the level of method, ethnography most commonly, user-centered design, ethnography. Now, I think that puts a lot of pressure on the user and the designer, because they essentially have to recreate all of this social theory from scratch. And if we haven't had a critical education, we can't expect users would have as well. And so how are they going to generate these structural and systematic analyses of the problems and crises that we face ab initio? I don't think it's possible, and so I think we have to complement methods with critical theory in design, in HCI, user experience, to give us kind of a head start, to be able to understand and predict what are the problems, what are the challenges, what are the issues that face us, and how within that context our interventions can solve things at a systematic and infrastructural level, rather than just at the level of user interface and product. And so I think that's why I think it's very important to read theory. And for me, I'm biased, but theory starts with Marx, and so I'm really going to focus most of my time here talking about what I think a few lessons that designers can take away from Marx. I want to start before that to just give you a little background on who I am and how I got to this place. I was trained in computer science, so I never encountered Marx throughout my academic career ever. And so I did a lot of work in social entrepreneurship, ICTD, developing countries, started companies, but I failed repeatedly. And I didn't fail technologically. We built a lot of stuff, we published a lot of papers, got IP, raised lots of money, even had successful companies. We did all of those things. But we didn't solve the underlying social or economic problem that we were trying to address. And so that was incredibly frustrating with me, because we weren't at the end of the day just trying to start companies. We wanted to solve these fundamental problems. And so that's what led to a whole process of reflection for me to try to think about, how does theory inform this practice? And I started with Marx, because I think that's the starting point for so many of us. First of all, I think we just have to recognize man was a genius. He 200 years ago, the Industrial Revolution hadn't even really happened yet. It was just beginning. And he was able to predict, all of these very systematic and structural issues that we were facing, not only at the level of phenomena, but also at the level of systems and processes. And so I think that's why, he's really just been very, very inspiring, and his work has been really, really inspiring for me as I think about these kinds of challenges. So what are some things that we can learn from Marx? Now, first of all, I should say that I teach a class on this at Cornell Tech. It's a full semester long class. We read not only Marx, but we read Gramsci, we read Fanon, we read a sequence of feminist thinkers. We even read, people from around the world. We read Gandhi, we read people from Brazil, Paulo Freire. So it's not only about Marx, this is a whole class. And so I'm going to distill just a short part of what we focus on in this particular lecture. But I put in the notes, links to the whole syllabus and more readings and so on if people are interested in such things. So anyway, what can we learn from Marx? So first of all, I think, one important thing we can learn is, all of our technological production, it draws upon a lot of hidden or invisible sources of labor. We think about technology as essentially being the source of our products, but it's not. It's actually the labor of the people involved in the system that creates our products. A very simple example is in terms of social media systems. Really, it's the labor of people who are doing curation, content filtering, verification that makes that a useful product. And so we often neglect these hidden and invisible sources of labor, including in design, the labor of users, the labor of people. Oh, 1 minute left, I should go quicker. So that's the first thing we can learn, is that there are a lot of these sources of hidden labor. The second thing, and that's called the labor theory of value. Second thing we need to learn is that, how we essentially organize our economy, how do we provide for our basic material needs, that actually has a huge influence on our theoretical foundations, our social institutions, our political institutions. So the idea of any of those things being neutral or unbiased is a fallacy. They're all created out of the underlying economic logic of production, which in our case is capitalism. And so this is the theory of historical materialism. This says that everything we understand, scientifically or otherwise, is conditioned by the underlying mode of production, and that these modes of productions evolve through various kinds of systems up until capitalism, and then hopefully eventually socialism.
Excuse me, Tapan, I will have to interrupt.
Let me get my last one. My last.
Got it.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Quick. Yeah, sure. Go for it.
So finally, I think the last point is, capitalism is a very, very productive system, and I think Marx recognized it, but it's also fundamentally unstable. And so to deal with this instability, we have to think about alternative modes of production that reconcile some of these fundamental tensions within the system. That's all I had to say. If you want to read more, you can go to the comments and so on. But anyway,
thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that. Another colleague of mine, Prasad Boratkar, also talks about Marx all the time. I don't know if you've heard of him, but capitalism, of course, has done a lot of damage to our society, and designers had played a big role in it. But very quickly, we're running out of time, so I have a quick question for Dr. Reddy. Deepa, this is all coming down to human and humanitarian work that the designers need to think about. What are your views on how do we proceed with that aspect, especially from human factors perspective, and how do we integrate that into our education?
Okay, so I think the first thing I want to say, one of the difficulties of coming last in a lineup such as this is that I'm probably going to end up touching on a lot of other already, which is a sign of a lot of confluence here. But anyway, so I think that a lot of the role of the social sciences in design, at least my experience of it, which is on one side of things perhaps, appears to have been to enable designers to connect to people. Right? So at a social level, at a psychological level, at an emotional level, just to be able to connect to people. If design is all about solving problems, it's a kind of social science methodological toolkit that is showing us what those problems are, or that should be showing us what those problems are. So I think that the first thing to say here is that the tether to the real world of human experiences, practices, belief systems, needs, etc., and what we call the human-centeredness of design, or that attunement, it all comes through a kind of grounding or connection to the social sciences. And of course, design has come to embrace and adapt these methodologies. And sometimes I look at what is called ethnography in design, and I don't quite recognize it anymore, right? But the connections are still there. So that's one point. But the second point is that the role and importance and value that is given to design, I think, is changing. And Praveen, touched on this in the beginning. So, and as this change, as these shifts are taking place, and the role of design is changing, I think what the social science toolkit has to foster in design also needs to change. And I think here we need more actually than just a methodological toolkit. The value of that is more or less established, I think. We need an analytical toolkit as well. And for this point, I think I'm probably, again, going to echo a couple of points that Tapan has made as well. So, for example, I often hear about the need for, say, design leadership, right? So far more than coming to design as an afterthought, there's a need to think of design as a matrix that pulls a whole lot of different things together, right? It's interdisciplinary, so it becomes a context, it becomes multiple metaphors that we can use, a maypole or the center of the wheel, right? Design has been very central to bringing a whole lot of different dimensions together and facilitating co-creation, iteration, so on and so forth. Now, I might be biased in this, but here is really where I see the value of a grounding in the social sciences as of being fundamentally important. But it's not just the social sciences, it's actually the social sciences themselves grounded in a liberal arts education. And so why do I say this? Because I think there are a few dimensions here, right? And if I can just outline them, I feel like I'm a cubist in my perspective because there are three aspects here, right? There's interdisciplinarity, which we've talked about. I mean, design is being interdisciplinary, but I mean even the social sciences are themselves a kind of interdisciplinary field. And then there is rootedness and expertise. So you get breadth from the interdisciplinarity, and then you need depth. And you need expertise. You need rootedness in a particular design, disciplinary way of thinking. And then I think you need lateral thinking, you can call width or length or whatever it is. So you've got these different dimensions, and each of these are actually helping us to learn to look, learn to think, and therefore only learn to solve problems, right? Just by way of context here, I came to anthropology via literary studies, via literature, and for me, in my graduate training, history, philosophy, rhetoric, history of ideas, microeconomics, science studies. I mean, all of these don't sound like anthropology anymore, but all of these were either already part of the disciplinary orientation, the training, or they were just a few steps away. And I think that's really important because there's a culture of actively drawing on the insights of these other disciplines and using those to be able to delve deeper into human experience. That's really core to the way I think social sciences at their best could operate. So that's the breadth I'm talking about, right? But what I'm also saying simultaneously is that breadth actually also leads to a depth. A deeper, finer connectedness with what people are experiencing or feeling or how cultures are being shaped. Or how upheavals are happening, a real identification with those shifts, right? Which people start to talk about as empathy in a very superficial way. But anyway, that's a separate conversation. And then it's also
I apologize, Deepa. We have only 2 minutes left.
Okay. So anyway, so I really just wanted to see
a full day conference on just this. I appreciate all your thoughts. I think I agree with you. One of my thoughts to conclude this is that maybe we should think about design education right from grade 1, and so that we relook at the design curriculum, right? Just like music, art, other things that we start teaching our kids from day 1. And maybe that's something that we could think about on the closing note. I highly appreciate all of you taking the time, the passion and enthusiasm that all of you have towards design education and how we can make this better going forward. It's not a new norm, I think. New norms could be anything. Tomorrow could be something else. Designers need to be continuously adapting. So thank you all. I hope we will all meet again sometime, and I appreciate all your contributions. I hope the participants got a lot out of it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you to our amazing speakers for making the discussion super exciting. A special thanks to our sponsors, Human Factors International, Adobe, Facebook, UNICEF, Catalonia Trade and Investment, if missing. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry it went out too much.
Sorry we had to end it so soon.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye, Praveen. Bye, Deepa. Bye, Masaaki. Bye, Tapan. Tapan, I think, is already gone. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Team of Designing Design. Let me first introduce you to our moderator, Mr. Vishal Kapoor. He is the Chief Design Officer from Future Group. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Tim Feifei. He's the independent strategist, designer, and innovation consultant. And Mr. Tirthankar Dash, he's the head design strategy and quantum consumer solutions. Welcome everyone. Over to you, Mr. Kapoor.